Welcome back, truth seekers, to another explosive episode of the podcast where we pull back the veil on the greatest deceptions of our time. Today, we deep dive into one of the most insidious control mechanisms of the archonic system, modern medicine. The lies run deep and the stakes couldn't be higher. For too long, we've been conditioned to believe in a model of disease based on fear, suppression, and pharmaceutical dependency. We've been told that our bodies are fragile, that sickness is random, and the only cure lies in synthetic chemicals peddled by trillion-dollar industries. Industries designed to profit from our suffering. But what if everything we've been told is a lie? What if symptoms they call illness are not mistakes of the body, but intelligent biological programs designed to heal? What if disease itself is misunderstood at its very foundation? Enter German New Medicine, a radical paradigm-shifting understanding of health that dismantles the fear-based medical model and reveals the body's true healing intelligence. GNM, German New Medicine, isn't just theory, it's biological law. It exposes how emotional shocks, trauma, and conflicts trigger specific adaptations in the body, often misdiagnosed as disease. What they call cancer isn't a rogue attack on the body, it is a biological response. What they call autoimmune disease isn't the body attacking itself, it's the body trying to repair. And who better to break down than our guest today, Robert Jardine, a man who has stepped beyond the programming, seen through the pharmaceutical illusion, and embraced the real science of healing. Here to expose the fraudulent foundations of allopathic medicine, the war on healing itself, and how reclaiming this knowledge can liberate us from the medical control grid once and for all. So, if you are ready to unlearn and to break the chains of medical tyranny and to reclaim sovereignty over your own body, then this episode is for you. Robert, thank you for staying awake on that fairly lengthy intro, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Callie, for giving me this opportunity to speak. Yeah.
I think it's like it's one of the biggest cons, as we know, going. I think a lot of my viewers and my subscribers, hi everybody, and thank you for continuing to do so. They know about the harm in pharma. We know that there's a reason why the word harm is in pharma, right? So we kind of get the basics. We know that we've been lied to. We know that, dis-ease, as we always say, is, a dis-ease in the body. But meeting, well, I've not met you personally, but chatting with you, and you've been on Richard Vosey, and it was through a friend of mine, a mutual friend, Alison, that she put us in touch. This is like next level, isn't it? I chatted on the phone to you for over an hour, and I was just like, stuff that I kind of inherently know but didn't know, but like I say, next level stuff. So disease, or is it a biological upgrade, Robert? We know that we've been lied to about illness. So the system, like I said in the intro, it tells us that disease is random, that it's caused by genetics or bad luck or something always attacking us, isn't it? It's like, we're being attacked by ourselves. And to keep us in this state of fear. So the entire medical industry, we're realizing, is built on a complete disempowering lie. And can you tell us a little bit more about how you got into this and how the body how it kind of works in basic kind of terms for people who are completely new to, people will be going, German new, what is it?
Okay, well, if you go trawling through the internet, you'll see Dr. Hammer's science and his discoveries comes under basically two different names: German New Medicine or Germanische Heilkunde. And that's something that Dr. Hammer, a name that Dr. Hammer wanted it called towards the end of his life, because he got so scunnered with the system, with what the system had done to him, after he's given mankind the greatest gift that has ever been given to mankind. So he called it Germanische Heilkunde. I represent, or I work along with and wholeheartedly represent Caroline Mercolin, PhD. She got a website, learninggnm.com, who has taken it upon herself, spent a lot of her life translating Dr. Hammer's extensive writings She herself has I think her PhD was in English, so she obviously could translate well. And but leading on from that, her website now has over a dozen languages, I think, that you can get his work. You can find a good reference. So I would say it's a really good reference point, and that's where I stand behind the learninggnm.com and their initiatives to put some truth into the world. Not discalling anybody else at all. There are others, and some of them are really good. So Dr. Hammer, no, let me talk about how I discovered this. My first introduction to it, and back in 1989, I built myself a little racing car that was road legal. It was a Lotus 7 type of car, and back then, I was obviously driving too fast, and I had an accident, and 3 weeks later I woke up, and my body was all, there was cables, there was bolts stuck through my legs, and cables were pulling them apart to stop the bones knitting up. So, and I'd be lying in hospital for getting on 3 weeks, not quite 3 weeks, but in a coma. And by the time I got patched up out of that, well, it took quite a few years really to start to get normality back into my thinking, my life, because head injuries they're an invisible disease, right? Or an invisible injury. You can't see it. If someone's lost a hand or something, you understand that. But if somebody's lost certain cognitive abilities and memories and such, nobody can see that. So it's kind of a lonely thing to get over. So then, about end of 1998, thereabouts, I was still looking for some help, and I started getting into therapy. So, oh God, this is really interesting, because I'm an engineer. My engineering is my trade. Electronics or instrumentation and control systems are my bread and butter. And so I was looking for some kind of solution to what I thought was my problem at the time. Even though now I think it's probably the biggest gift that's ever happened to me, at that time it was still a big problem that I was trying to overcome. So I went into therapy, and I was going to be an osteopath, actually, and I got accepted for a prestigious college. But they said, well, you've got no qualifications in anything that's good for osteopathy. Your qualifications are engineering. So in that year, I had to study anatomy, physiology, human biology, chemistry, which I did. And as a mature student, I just went in straight and did my hires and that, and did good at it. But during that year, I discovered kinesiology. I thought, what's this? So that was interesting. So I thought, do you know what? I couldn't hardly afford to pay the costs of the osteopathic training, and B, the kinesiology seemed a bit more more interesting, and it was going to me. It was more. It interests me because it sort of was going below the symptom. Osteopathy and such. They say, oh well, it's the spine alignment, and everything comes from that. But I very soon learned that no, but then what's made the spine misalign? What's put the body out of balance? So I went down that road, and I became a kinesiologist, and I was trying to make a small living out of that. But my sister, the whole of the time, right, that this was happening, my sister had been suffering aggressive rheumatoid arthritis, and I tried everything that I could, from flower essences to muscle testing to as much as I could think of it to try. And it wasn't really making any difference at all, to be honest. And so the years rolled around, and then in 2006, I met a guy. I was on kinesiology advanced workshop. I was going to become a kinesiology instructor. But I met this guy anyway at this workshop. It was in Auckland. And he said, oh, you should check out the work of Dr. Hammer. Because I was talking about my sister, you know, what can we do to help my sister? Is it energetic? Is it dietary? Is it inherited from past lives? Didn't know where it wouldn't, didn't know where to go with it because I tried everywhere and nothing had come good. So he said, yeah, check this out. So at that time in 2006, I came back from Auckland and I started reading what I could about this guy I'd never heard of before, Dr. Hammer. And I got a couple of articles, I read them, and I read it a couple of times and I thought, wow, this makes sense to me. And being a controls engineer, it really resonated because he was talking about control systems of the body, and also that the body has got a control program running it, and that it's monitoring life. And I thought, oh my God, that's my bread and butter. Control systems and monitoring systems and you know, computers that you know, control oil rigs and submarines and things, right? So armed with little more than just reading these couple of articles, I thought I would try again to help my sister. And we walked up the river. I'm speaking to you from the north of Scotland on a croft, on a small holding or a small farm, and there's a river runs through it. And me and my sister Janet walked up the river to a point about half a mile up, and I was talking away to her, but in the back of my mind, I kind of knew where I was going with the conversation. I wanted to find something. So I was kind of nudging her back through her timeline and talking about life. And at that time, well, she came back to a time that was 16 years prior to then, which was 2006. So that would have been 1990. And there was just something came up that obviously she had maybe been keeping out of sight or out of mind and out of conversation. Anyway, because I was kind of looking for something, I sort of kind of forced the issue a bit. And all of a sudden, she just erupted emotionally. I mean, she just absolutely came to pieces. Do you know what I mean? She she went into like, she had to sit down, she had to cry, she was blubbering, she didn't know what to do or say. There was just a massive pile of emotion just came flooding out of her about something that happened all that time back, and she had been holding herself responsible for it.
Yeah.
Silently, okay, she didn't even want to talk about it, right? But it was deep stuff, big stuff. And anyway, the cat was out of the bag. And I was all ears, right? And all I did was listen and hold her and support her through offloading it, right? And just to be there for her. I didn't try and solve it for her. I didn't try and be a therapist and sort her life problems out for her. I just was there to be a sponge, basically, and try and mop it up. And after about half an hour, maybe more, sitting there and just talking and crying, and you know, then she sort of started to pull herself back together, and she felt like that was a big offload. Like she had never done that. She wasn't an emotional person. She was a tight-lipped person, you know, that didn't let things like that. She would always go to anger more than that sort of thing. You know, she'd be any injustice in the world, and she would be after it, right? But she'd felt she'd done something, and she'd harbored that self-guilt. She offloaded it big style. Well, all I can say was she got better from an autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis. At that time, she was on quite a few drugs. One of them was methotrexate, which is a chemotherapy drug, or chemotherapy poison, as I would prefer to call it. And she after that day walking up the river, she just didn't take any of them at all. And because of that drug, methotrexate, she was being seen by a doctor in a special sort of rheumatoid arthritis clinic in Dingwall, and she had to go every month to get her bloods tested because they were trying to balance, gain over pain, like whether the drugs was going to kill her first or whether they were helping the inflammation, which was rampant in her body, all over her body. Anyway, she went back there about a week or so, I don't know, 10 days after, thereabouts, and the doctor said, right, that's fine, took the bloods, talking away, how's things going, and they were looking really good. This was 10 days after. Then the doctor phoned her up the next day. So you must come back in and get your bloods taken again because we seem to have messed up the samples because we've got to redo this, right? It's not right. So she went back in and she got the same result, as in bloods were perfectly clear of all inflammatory markers. Boom. Ever since, to be honest, right after the talk we had, our big emotional release. Yeah, she was in a state the rest of that day, and but from then on, she was very tired. She was obviously so-called sickening with something, but she wasn't really. She was going through a healing phase. But within some days, anyway, the inflammation had died down a lot. Now, she didn't take any of those drugs after that conversation that we had. She just stopped taking them. She just knew she knew she was better. And the blood test proved it. Just I saw about a week or so after. I don't remember exactly, but it was in that time she was on that monthly cycle of getting her bloods done. And the doctor just says to her, my God, I've never, ever seen this protocol work so completely. You must just keep taking it just as it is. It's perfect. Don't stop, because this is miraculous. And that Janet left the clinic and never went back. And she never took any of those medications since that conversation. She managed basically to she was carrying an emotional burden that was burning into her, right? And it was causing, now I know from my studies now, it was a severe self-devaluation conflict, a conflict where she felt that she had failed and she wasn't good enough at something. And that something had happened within her family 16 years prior to that. And the body was actively trying to do something biologically to help her cope, or to help her solve, if you like, in a biological prehistoric way, this modern day life issue which she had been carrying. So it was never going to do it. So her body was just stuck trying to help her. And one of the symptoms of the help was to cause inflammation of the bone tissue. And it was just it's like everyone else with that condition and any other autoimmune disease as well. The body is trying to help the person resolve an emotional issue biologically. And it's doing it because the perspective of the body is prehistoric. So it's only got one answer. It's only got one thing to do. If you have a self-evaluation conflict running in your psyche and in your brain, then the body is going to be going through a process, and that's all it can do. But underneath it all, if you just go back to underneath it all, even though my sister's body had deformed, her fingers were deformed, her feet were deformed, she was having struggle to walk by that time. Even though underneath it all, the body is actually trying to practically do something in a positive way to help her cope. Of course, what happens is the symptoms that process causes become a secondary conflict. And then the thing becomes self-perpetuating as well, which is a different, it's another level to the knowledge. But anyway, after that, she never got any more inflammation. Her joints were deformed. Okay, I mean they didn't straighten up. Her fingers didn't straighten up because by this time the body had been doing its process for 16 years. But all the pain left her, and I'd say more importantly, the weight had lifted off her shoulders. Do you know what I mean? I could see the spark come back in my sister, So wow. It was good. And she was
Oh,
Uh,
I mean, it's massive, that, isn't it, Robert? Absolutely massive. I'm not surprised you get overwhelmed with emotion to that, because it's something, isn't it? Like that, you look at that pharmaceutical industry, that dollar science, that industry is
yeah,
designed to keep people in suffering, to keep people sick. It's like if you were running a hotel, you want maximum occupancy for your beds, don't you? And that's exactly what that
yeah,
industry wants. And when it's somebody close to you, and I know I talked about my sister who sadly died of leukemia, and we had a good chat about that, and I'll tell you the story of what happened to me that night after I'd had a conversation with you. Like, I had this kind of almost my physical, I had this, it was so strange. It was like I went to bed and I was fine, and an hour later, and I'm the queen of suppression a bit, not so much these days because I've done a lot of inner work, but I think I woke up an hour later and I was shivering, I was cold, my body was shaking to the bone, and it was like I was having this massive panic attack, but laced with being sick as well. And I swear that was me releasing something pretty big in my body, like all
yeah,
that pent up, like you say with your sister, like like I was having this kind of strange breakdown, really. But I'll get on to that because
yeah.
I've got a question to ask you about that, so we'll kind of deep dive that a bit later. But keeping on this kind of vibe, like obviously we know what that industry is, and this is like another, wow, this is just like picking it apart to a degree that has like blown my mind as well. And like you say, that perhaps, that quote by C.S. Lewis I always remember. I sat with my anger enough. You talked about your sister's anger, and I was angry, and I carried that with me a long time, but didn't realize what that was and suppressed it. And then, I sat with my anger enough until I realized it was grief. And C.S. Lewis allegedly said that. So, and I think, we store this in our bodies, aren't we? We are these electrical beings. We are, like you just said, the brain, is, the body is a product of the mind. We say things like that willy-nilly every day, but we truly are these biological computers, aren't we? And with your background, like you say, in engineering and systems, you've
Mhm.
transferred that knowledge, and been able to obviously kind of see, instinctively, hang on a minute, this absolutely 100% fits. So
Mhm.
I think, could you tell us, obviously, because there's people who'll be watching this. I've obviously kind of gone through the website, and I have a lot more idea than perhaps the listeners. So uh, when you talk about how, how you kind of cured your sister in effect, and there's these five biological laws, isn't there, of German new medicine. Can you tell us a little bit kind of what underpins the theories, just so people can kind of get a better grasp in
Okay,
their
yeah,
minds?
yeah. Well, I tell you, what, I'll start. I'll just start that with a little story about Dr. Hammer himself. Now, Dr. Hammer was a genius times 10, right? I mean, he was the youngest ever qualified doctor in German history.
Yeah.
Um, he's got various, he made many patents. He invented wonderful gadgets, which are still patented today and used in surgery all over the world. And he decided to study cancer. Um, and that would have been in the 70s. Um, and he was working at a clinic helping ladies who had a life expectancy. It's called the 5-year survival rate. So it's just like a standard clinical measurement of how good something's going. And it's called the 5-year survival rate, So these ladies had a 5-year survival rate of well below 10%. Okay, so 10% of them only, or less than 10%, were expected to be alive 5 years after diagnosis. And Dr. Hammer himself was involved with that, and he was getting kind of the same results, I suppose, until he had a trauma where his son was injured. A big long story there, which I don't need to go into too much, but eventually it transpired that the son ended up dying in his dad's arms. And within a very short time after that, a very healthy man, Dr. Hammer was, he developed testicular cancer. And he had one testicle removed, and he refused the rest of the therapy. And he managed, his wife was a GP as well. And he managed to sort of talk his grief out enough to go back to work within 3 or 4 months after that, his sickness, or so-called sickness, of the testicular cancer. But he did have a burning question in his mind. Was it the trauma that caused him to get ill all of a sudden. You know, why did his body just suddenly develop a cancer? So he started interviewing all his patients, and it turned out that without exception, they'd all had a major event in their lives, which was very emotionally sensitive still. And he thought, my God, everyone's had the same, you know? That's interesting to him. Like he noted that down. And it was in the case of with all of them, without exception. So his son came back to him in dreams, in very vivid dreams, and told him to keep searching, that there's more, he's got to learn more. And it's basically, Dr. Hammer says that his son guided him through his scientific journey into German new medicine. And one of the things, one of the sort of guidances that he maybe got from his son was that he should start photographing the brain. So he did that. And what he then discovered was that, oh my God, this was back in the early 80s, all of the women, mostly women in this with gynecological type cancers and breast cancers, all of them, when you compared the brain scans, they all had the same lesion in the brain. So everyone with, say, the breast cancer in the left breast had the lesion in the right such and such, right? And everyone with cervical cancer that had the lesion in the same place. And he thought, oh my God, they're all the same without exception, right? It's like, I mean, looking at these, when you look at the brain scans, if you don't know how to do it, you won't see the patterns in them. But once you've been doing it for a while, you start to see these little patterns. They're called Hammer foci. And these patterns appear, and Dr. Hammer put the two together, right? So they've had a trauma, there's a mark in the brain, and there's the same cancer. Oh, so we thought, right, well, what happens if we try and use the therapy to sort the trauma out, you know? And lo and behold, as soon as they did that, the mark in the brain changed. Wow. Very quickly. It changed overnight. And the cancer, whatever cancer they had, it changed completely. So anybody that was presenting with an adeno or adenoid cancer, as soon as they resolved the issue, that cancer, the body started to reject it really strongly. And the body started to, well, at that time, he thought it got infected with bacteria. But over the years, Dr. Hammer realized the body's using those bacteria to get rid of that cancer out of the body quick as it can. And so he discovered leading on from this, he discovered that, well, that not only cancer, but all diseases, I underline all of them, apart from, I'm contradicting myself there, but apart from poisoning, physical or radiological injury, and complete starvation, right? Or an asphyxiation as well, right? Those things, they just kill you, right? Like if you get shot, you know, it's the bullet that kills you, right? But everything that's not that, everything else that's in a medical dictionary, which is, you know, a very big book, right, full of diseases, all of them, right, are caused by the same process of the body reacting to, it's like the body's reacting biologically to an emotional thing. And the emotional event has to have certain parameters to it that makes it emotional. Otherwise, we wouldn't live past the cot. You know, we would never get out of the pushchair. We'd be stone dead with some disease, but we're not. So, and it's because we're not constantly triggered into this biological survival process that the body has programmed into it. So every so-called disease is part of a process which has started initially with a emotional scene, situation, or event, which bypassed the conscious mind, and the biological psyche picked up on it. And in that instant of time, the biological brain, namely the psyche, attributes a theme to that trauma, and then it goes to its available biological adaptive responses and just presses that button that says, right, bang, there's breast cancer, bang. That'll help you feed your grandson who's fallen off his motorbike and he's critically ill. Boom. Right. Just that quick, right? In less than a second it happens. And this is when the mark appears in the brain. Boom. Instantaneously. As soon as that trauma bypasses your conscious ability to cope with it, or as Dr. Hammer would say, it catches you on the wrong foot, boom. The brain ring appears, boom. The cancer, let's say, starts to develop, right? Or if it's not a cancer, the multiple sclerosis, the process of it start to happen, or the Crohn's disease, the processes of it, which eventually present as the so-called disease, start to happen. But the underlying motive of our body in doing this is to help us, right? Yeah. Because that makes, when you think about it that way, it just makes complete sense. It's only sensible to think that your body's going to try to help you get through life, isn't it? Because the body stands to gain as much as we do, right? Right. So that's the first law. That there's a little bit more to it, but for a conversation today, right? It's plenty enough. There's been a big shock. It's caught you on the wrong foot. It's triggered a biological adaptive process, and it starts a process in the body, which is not only biological, it can also cause, it in fact is the cause of psychoses as well. So your depressions, your kleptomania, your manic depressions, your mythomania, and all the different diseases of the mind are also caused through this process. So the next, the second law, because Dr. Hammer has
Robert, because there's a big thing about, obviously, we don't want toxic bodies either, because there's a big drive that we're all starting to realise the toxins that are in our food, in the air, in our clothing, in our detergents, in everything. It's like you can't move for toxins, and there's a big kind of push for parasite cleanses, things like that. I mean, I mean, obviously we don't want to be toxic, so we want to kind of, obviously just by common sense you would want to do that, but obviously the big thing is like toxins cause disease and I mean, is how does that kind of sit along? Because that if I was watching, I'd be thinking, oh, what about that? Like, how does that kind of work in relation to obviously everything stemming from the mind?
Okay. Great question, right? Well, I'll talk about toxins. I'll not talk about infections, which is a different thing, right? Which is so-called germs, right? But toxins, poisoning can kill you. And I said that to start with. One of the things that can kill you is poisoning, right? Or if I didn't say it, I forgot, but I should have said, I think I did. You can get physical injuries or poisoning, right? And yeah, poisoning can kill you, right? But it cannot cause a disease. You can't get asthma because you're getting poisoned, and the poison just happens to be affecting one small part of your lungs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can become severely depleted. Your vibrance, your life energy, your biological potential, your biological strength can get very depleted with toxic poisons, right? But it cannot cause a cold sore, or it cannot cause tinnitus, or it cannot cause vitiligo, or it cannot cause bowel cancer, right? Yeah. Or it cannot cause hemorrhoids, or gangrene's different, or it cannot cause athlete's foot, right? Toxins don't do that, right? Toxins just kind of poison us a bit, and yeah, if we detox, it's a great thing. And if you eat good food, it's a good thing. But it's not. My opinion is, don't go searching down that rabbit hole to try and cure your Crohn's disease, or try and cure your eczema, or try and cure anything, right? You can go down that rabbit hole to try and give your body a good, give it the best, give it the best environment in which to do its work. But as far as like curing diseases or so-called diseases go, you've got to actually go into the programming of the body, and you can. We know this because of I think it's a figure of in excess of 50,000 cases, right? The Dr. Hammer on his when he passed in 2017, 50,000 cases that he had complete detailed records of, including CT scans and the full history of the client from when they first got the so-called disease until they'd finished the therapy and they were completely back to good health again. You're talking in excess of 50,000, right? And each of those people, they didn't just come, well, not all of them just came with one thing. Some of them had like breast cancer, lung cancer, bone cancer, and lymph cancer, right? And God knows what else, right? And so if you take 50,000 cases, and let's just say on average, each of those people probably had 3 things going on with them. So multiply 50,000 by 3, it's 150,000 separate symptoms that Dr. Hammer has been able to quantify and identify in brain scans, right? I mean, and it's not been wrong one time.
No.
Not once, not a single time has it not been correct, these 5 laws. So by the time if something's that well proven, then you're best to start listening up, right? Because if that doesn't fit in with whatever paradigm you're currently, feeling inclined to believe, if it doesn't fit with it, then I would, being an engineer, I would say, well, let's just look at hard facts. Like what is proven to is there any proven evidence that this actually works and that everything he says is true? And also then I would look at whatever else I'm doing and say, well, does the same apply to that? And you'll find that it probably doesn't. There's a lot of hypotheses. I mean, I don't think there's actually any facts in medicine whatsoever. I think everything's based on hypotheses, which are all wrong.
Fiction, yeah.
Right?
Same with the legal
Yeah.
system. It's just a big fiction, isn't it? And they're all taught the wrong things. Same with the legal system.
Exactly. So, and because it's an industry, and the overarching reason for industry is to move wealth in your direction, right? And medicine and pharmacology is no different. So where was I?
I think we were up to like the second.
The second law, yeah. So what the next thing Dr. Hammer discovered was that all of these so-called diseases or symptoms are part of a process which has 2 halves to it. The process starts with a trauma that bypasses your conscious ability to cope, and it brings an unresolved issue into your awareness, into your life. This issue very often gets filed subconsciously quite quickly, and you don't go around thinking about it all the time, but sometimes we do, okay? Nevertheless, there's an unresolved issue gets created in the moment of that shock. The body adapts in a certain way, depending on where in the brain the shock is processed. Okay, dead simple. If the shock is processed in the neocortex, in the top layer of the brain, you'll start to develop dry skin somewhere, for example. Whereas if that shock is lodged into the brainstem, you'll start to develop an adenocancer somewhere, right? And that will continue. Both of those symptoms will continue until the conflictive element of that trauma is resolved. When it's resolved, just as quickly as the trauma entered your brain, the brain switches into healing, like a control system. It takes a second to go into healing. When the body goes into healing, a whole set of predetermined biological processes then kick in for the reversal of the process which had been taking place up until you healed the issue. So then off you go on the healing journey. Now, if you're lucky and you get through that healing journey, you'll end up back where you started in perfectly normal health again. And when that happens, the body then switches out of this biological adaptive process back into normalness. It's all gone, all done, right? So every disease is part of a two-phase process. Really important, because guess what? Almost all infectious diseases are actually the second part of this process, as in the healing part. You have the conflict active part and the healing part. So your cold, your common cold, right? Your common cold's been going in a relay in your brain ever since your psyche picked up on the life issue which has been bothering it, right? As soon as that life issue which has been bothering your psyche, right? Your psyche is your biological brain. It's like your lookout system into life. It's connected to every sense that you've got, and it's connecting to every thought. It's monitoring what you're thinking as well. It's not creating those thoughts directly. Our conscious mind does that, but the psyche is kind of watching what's going on, also internally as well as externally. Okay, so the psyche watches what's going on. If a biologically significant trauma hits it, it starts a process. That process continues until that life issue and the trauma is released. You go into healing. That's when you get a cold, a stink conflict. So, isn't that strange? All of a sudden, you can't. Well, obviously, you can't catch a cold then. Not even if you went up to the most snotty person that's absolutely sneezing and coughing and wheezing and snog them for 10 minutes, right? And snog them, right? And right, you wouldn't catch a cold, because all that person is all that is a living human being that's in the middle of a healing of an emotional life conflict, right? Right. So that's the next thing he discovered, that all diseases are part of a two-phase process. I'll give you a really good example. The female breasts, right? 10% of breast cancers are intraductal. Sorry, that's wrong. 10% of breast cancers are glandular, right? Glandular cancer develops, so the lump in the breast develops in the first half of this two-phase process, after the woman has had the trauma over something, either the partner or the child, for example. It can also be in a result, or as a result of a discontentment within the nest. So it could be a discontentment with the child, or a discontentment with the partner as well can cause it. Okay. If it's the 10% of women that get the glandular, it grows in the first half of this two-phase process. And in the second half, the body uses bacteria to try and remove that cancer biologically, naturally. Whereas the other 90% of ladies who get diagnosed with breast cancer, it's intraductal. Now, the intraductal starts or presents when the conflict is resolved. And then all of a sudden, both the breast starts swelling up in a whole segment, a whole breast, or just a small part of a segment, or just a small patch behind the nipple, for example, will swell up, right? That in itself is a sign that that lady has resolved a type of separation issue, and her body now is rebuilding all those ducts inside the breast which have been involved.
Wow. And
so
is that, Robert,
when
they feel a lump, really, and that's when they go to the doctor, the guy in the white coat, who then radiates the crap out of them?
Well, I mean, you can feel a lump on both of these. If the lump's a kind of slow-growing lump that just like, it slowly gets bigger, then that is most likely to be an adenocarcinoma of the ducts. See, the breasts, right? Lovely as they are, right? The glands are kind of further up, and the ducts come down to the nipple, right? So if the lump, if the lump is in the glandular tissue, right? Then, and it's an adeno, they'll do a biopsy and you know, somebody will get, oh, you've got an adeno stage 3, such and such, HER2 positive, da 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 da, you know, it goes on and on, right? But really what's happening is that if you did a brain scan of that lady, there will be a mark in her cerebellum without exception. That's it.
Wow.
In fact, that's the only actual. In fact, it's the actual way that is the most accurate way of diagnosing it. What type of breast cancer you've got? If you look at a brain scan, you can say, "Oh, no, her cerebellum's clear. There's nothing going on there. Oh, look, hold on, there, it's the ducts." Or you could even be certain lymph nodes. You can even look at that in the brain scan and say, "Oh, no, there it is. There, that's the cancer, right? Or the
Wow.
so-called cancer, right?" So there you go. Within breast cancer, 10% of them are signs that there's a conflict active, and it's an adenoid cancer
Yeah.
controlled specifically from the cerebellum, or 90%, like, hear that number again, 90% of these breast cancers, according to German New Medicine, and he was right, are healing symptoms.
Yeah. Wow.
Now get a grip of that. I mean, whoa,
I
like,
know.
my God. You've got a healing symptom. Doesn't sound half as scary as you've got cancer.
Wow. And we know, don't we? It's like as soon as you go into, the hospital and they say, "Oh, you've got cancer," you're walking out there going, "Oh my God, I've got cancer. Oh my God, I've got cancer. Oh my God, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die." And you're repeating that to
Tell,
yourself, aren't you? And like,
tell me about it. And as I've said, all diseases, including cancers, are caused with an initial trauma. Now, Dr. Hammer's on record as saying that most cases of lung cancer, which incidentally, or to be exactly specific, alveolar lung cancer, because there's more than one type,
yeah.
most cases of that are caused by the doctor giving diagnosis.
Yeah, wow. So that's exactly it. So you've got the kind of the initial thing going on with your body trying to heal itself, but then you go to the second point and then they diagnose you at the healing stage. Same with leukemia, like I say, which we'll get onto a little bit later, hopefully. But like,
Yeah.
wow.
So
It's just that
yeah.
system,
What?
just like it's like the utter, it's like in the Matrix, isn't it? When they feed the dead intravenously to the living, like the actual horror of it, like when you
Yeah.
face with the actual truth of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, yeah. But anyway,
Next time.
we're here for information, right? So we've now established that diseases, no matter what they are, apart from a few things that are not really diseases, they're more like poisoning and injury. That doesn't count. But the rest of them, this applies to it. It's always caused by trauma. It starts a process. Potentially the process has two phases to it. If the conflict is ever resolved, then you go into the healing phase. The healing phase presents as most things that keep kids off school, for example, measles, mumps, whooping
Yeah.
cough, the cold, the flu, right? All of these things are actually biologically programmed into your brain and your psyche, and they all get started when a conflict goes into resolution. So they're
Wow.
healing symptoms. And yes, the kid does need to stay off school, and he needs to be in bed, and he needs to be just resting and not sitting on some brain wiring game that's filling him full of adrenaline. Just needs to be calm, and off, and just get better, and then go back to school if you do school, right? Um, so yeah, we've got the two processes, right? We've got the shock, we've got the two phase process. The next thing that Hammer discovered was that the theme of the trauma that your psyche suffered determines whereabouts in the brain the program is run. So the brain's got loads of places in it, loads of relays, I call them, because that's what the German New Medicine calls them. I'm an engineer that deals with relays, so it's relays, the parts of the brain that do a specific thing. And if that part of the brain, we've talked about the breast cancer, if that gets involved, bang, it'll be because it's a type of nest worry, for example, or disagreement in the nest. Whereas the intraductal breast cancer is the child was torn from my breast, or the opposite. My God, I just want to tear this person from my breast because they're sucking me dry, right? That's the second type of cancer, which is the one most common. So the theme of the trauma determines where in the brain this happens, which then determines the whole process from there on in. Whether you end up with athlete's foot or whether you end up with alopecia, right?
Wow.
It's just determined in that moment by the theme. And it's even more difficult to get your head around because it is the experienced theme
Wow.
of the trauma,
And
not
that's so,
the
that's so
trauma.
individual, isn't
It's
it?
not an objective thing. It's not an objective thing. It's a subjective trauma.
Wow.
It's your theme, right?
Wow.
And that's why the same trauma can give one person gout, another person
Exactly.
IBS, and somebody else nothing, right? It's the perceivedness of it that's the
Yeah.
thing, right? So that's the third law, and it's really useful for people who are using this to help other people, because you can, if you get if somebody had an interpreted set of brain scans and said, well, we've got a lesion there, there, and there, I would kind of go, oh, right, okay, well, that must be this then. That symptom that you've got is this. I know for a fact that now, right? So, but nevertheless, it's a law that the perceived what's the word, theme subject determines where in the brain, and from that determines the whole thing that goes forward from that, all predetermined. So you can actually tell that if you've got anybody in any moment of that big long process, you could say, right, well, you've got an actively growing let's say, well, we talked about the breast cancer, so it's an adeno breast cancer. When you resolve this conflict, this will happen, and it will last that long, and you will feel this, and at the end of it, this will happen. You'll be able to know that through German new medicine, right? It's 100% predictable. So that's the third law, right? That the conflict content, subjectively experienced, determines what happens, where in the brain, and then where in the body.
Wow.
The fourth law, this is even more amazing. The fourth biological law says that all microbes within the body are here because the body wants them here. And the body farms them. Your body farms all of the bacteria and all of the candida that it has in it. The body maintains it. There's no such thing as an infection. Every single bacteria that's in your blood, Callie, is there because your body wants it there. Nobody catches it, right? Same with infections, same with fungal infections. Every piece of candida is in your body because your body wants it there. And that all of these microorganisms only become active at the moment of the resolution of the trauma.
Yeah, wow.
Wow.
I'm like one of them nodding Churchill dogs. I just keep going, wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. So for example, the lung cancer, right? The glandular, the alveoli lung cancer. So as that conflict is in the first stage, so you have the death, right? Let's say you get the diagnosis of, oh my God, your PSA level's too high or something, right? Boom, oh my God, right? You've started your lung cancer, right? Then the adenoid lung cancer, no, it's adeno lung cancer grows, controlled from the brainstem. In parallel with the development of that lung cancer, a colony of tubercular bacteria grow. And if the cancer gets this big, the colony gets this big. If the cancer gets that big, the colony gets that big, right? So the colony is grown to the size of the cancer because the body knows, because the body's got a whole beautiful millions of years of wisdom trapped in it. It is wisdom. Your body is wisdom. It's the physical expression of wisdom, allowing our spirit to experience an existence, right? That's where we're at, okay? And the body knows it's going to need that much bacteria to get rid of that much cancer. So as soon as the death sprite goes into resolution, those bacteria cause tuberculosis. And that's what happened after the First World War. Everyone says, oh, everyone caught tuberculosis. No one caught it. It's just that everyone either was frightened of dying or frightened of their children dying in war. And when that eventually went into resolution, right, epidemic, and if you add to that there wasn't enough food, because one important thing that Dr. Hammer has shown us is that when this type of cancer goes into resolution, the body needs to feed these bacteria, because the bacteria are hungry. They are very busy. They've got to really get this growth, whether it's a bowel cancer or a lung cancer or a breast cancer. It's got to get the growth out of the body. So that those bacteria have got to be fed fuel, and the fuel of a bacteria is protein. Now, if you don't eat enough protein and you're in healing of one of these cancer programs, you'll die of cachexia. You'll waste away very quickly, right? But if you are lucky enough and have an abundance of food with high protein intake, fish and chicken and stuff, right, then you will not suffer cachexia. You will not waste away, and the bacteria will be well fed to keep devouring the cancer, to I think the word's exudate it from the body. So so there's another important thing to know, right? That all microbes are there in our body because our body wants them, and they're exclusively active in the healing phase of any biological process, and that viruses do not exist at all.
No. And that's obviously been a big one currently with what we've known and experienced over the last 5 years, without, and if we can't mention the V word here, but we'll say jibby jab, as I say. And obviously we know that, I mean, those were one of my first, I mean, obviously because my sister died of leukemia when I was 10, 11, that was my big wake up. Before we even had internet and we got dial up, and then I watched those Ty Bollinger, I think if I'm getting that name right, The Truth About Cancer, which obviously wasn't the whole truth because we get to this point, but it's always levels in it and layers of onion peeling, but that you can't catch a virus. Those were some of my really early kind of videos like 5 years ago, because I just went and researched viral theory, people like Dr. Robert Young, a host of people. What was he called? Arjunus Wunderplanets. I was like deep into his stuff, and I came out, and honestly, I got absolutely lynched for saying that you can't catch a virus. I think the only way you can get a virus is if it is injected into you. Hence, and that leads us back around to the mRNA jibby jabbies, doesn't it?
Well, you can't. The viruses don't exist. So you can't get one, no matter in any way, right? Because they're just a hypothesis, right? They're an hypothesis, and they still are after how many years? 50 years, 60, 70 years. They still haven't got one. There's still nobody has ever, honestly, nobody has ever isolated a virus, right? No, because if you look at the word isolate, doesn't mean to say in a soup of stuff with loads of bits of dead fetus and bit of this shit. No, isolate means isolate. It means it's on its own. That's not being done, and neither. So the Koch's postulates have never. There's not one piece of information which has actually satisfied not even half of the Koch's postulates, let alone all of them. Right. So I'm sorry, I'm upset some people, and we are putting a disclaimer on, because everything's just for information and entertainment purposes, and we must understand that. But the viruses don't exist, right? And if they did exist, they are natural, and if they did exist, they would be part of nature and part of us, and they would do the exact same as all bacteria and all fungi. Okay. They would do so. Even if they did exist, they would not cause any disease, because, and this is a very important, really important to get into your understanding of health, is that Hammer has been able to see every single disease, including the flu and the cold and the herpes and the gonorrhea, in the brain scan. Now, you're
Yeah.
not telling me that the flipping viruses go into the brain as well and kind of drill holes in the brain as well in one smart region. I mean, come on, that's like getting crazy world, right? To even go there. But as long as people don't know this, they can believe the lie. Do you understand what I mean? It's from
Yeah,
is the
exactly.
lie can, a lie needs ignorance to exist,
Yeah.
right? That's fact, right?
Yeah.
So as long as they can maintain the ignorance,
Yeah.
or who I should say they, I don't know who they is, but as long as the ignorance is maintained, the lie can exist.
100%. And it works, like I say, in the work with the law we do with the law and the legal system. And I know we were chatting, Robert, it's all fictional. It's all a deceit and a lie, and it's called
Yeah.
the whole system is. So of course this, fits in perfectly with
Mhm.
the truth, and I suppose like when we interviewed Tony Sayers, like he calls the body a prison, but we are these hue of men, or we are these beings of light, we are electrical, aren't we have these circuits, and like you say, how you can kind of use your engineering work and see how that works in as we are these biological computers in the body. But he would say, like, obviously when we condense this light, this energy into matter, it gives us this physical material experience. But of course everything is frequency, isn't it? Everything like is working on these like layers and levels that we've just not had that comprehension, or we've just not tuned into. I mean, big pharma, we know, like medicine, it's black, it literally is black magic from ancient Babylon. Prescription literally means to write a spell, like literally, like in our etymology, and like you were saying about disease, inverted commas, it's prescript. It's almost like your body knows the script, your body knows what it's going to do. And then obviously the pharmaceutical industry, that obviously is, like we've said, a multi-trillion-dollar industry, wants to come and keep us sick and keep us stupid. They don't want us healing people, they don't want us knowing the truth. And it's and I mean, it's one of the biggest lies. I mean, people probably, if you weren't kind of perhaps already, say, it's like, I don't like the word awake, but aware, you'd probably listen to us too and think we were a complete couple of cranks. And like Robert says, we're not giving out medical advice. We are not medical professionals. This is for entertainment purposes only, and we must
Mhm.
kind of really kind of drive that home. But the body literally is a product of the mind. We say these things flippantly. It's like how I always used to say, as above, so below. And as we're learning on this channel, that is literally the truth. The constellations are in the landscape itself. Everything we've been taught is a lie. And to unlearn that, I suppose that could be quite traumatic for people in and of itself. That would cause a conflict, wouldn't it? And that system, isn't it? We talk about devaluation conflict. And wow,
Mhm.
that's all this system wants us to do to ourselves. We're constantly devaluing ourselves in this system, isn't it? It thrives on our pain and suffering. I mean, I always
Mhm.
use my poor mother as an example, but my mum was going, "What have you all got? This generation, your generation, what have you all got to moan about?" And I go, "Right, okay, let's rhyme it off. We've been lied to all our lives.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
were sold into a system of debt slavery. Everything we've been taught is a lie." I said, and then they pit men and women against each other. We're sold commerce, we're sold sex. We're told the complete wrong things about disease and how our bodies work. They want to keep us sick, stupid, all this stuff. I had all the trauma of my sister, then you've got that trauma, then you've got trauma on trauma, because like you say, it becomes a vicious cycle, doesn't it? And then you've got to heal that. Then you've got to wake up. And then you've got, I said, and then the mass genocide of the planet by a psychopathic government, without going into the darker escalons of who these people are. And let me tell you that it goes far darker. Yeah, nothing traumatic about this place. Just like, you're in hell
No.
and you've just woke up, wakey wakey. But yeah. But anyway, I'll let you
Yeah.
crack on, because I think I've blabbed on enough, and I think we'll be up to the fifth, I think, law,
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah. We are. Yeah. So far we've established, or Dr. Hammer has established, for entertainment purposes only, that everything starts with a trauma. It The body reacts biologically. It's all controlled. You can photograph it in the brain happening. It starts a process. If you resolve that life issue that came into being in the trauma, you can resolve it, you go into the healing phase. So it's a two-phase process. That the theme of the conflict, as perceived subjectively, determines what happens the whole way forward, the brain relay and the symptoms and the process that goes through, governed by that brain relay and the psyche that's controlling it. The fourth biological law, which is it's a law as in it has never has, it's always there, it's ever present, is that all microbes within the body, okay, are here at the behest of the body. And they almost exclusive, in fact, they exclusively work, come into action, you exclusively get the infection when the body's in the healing phase of one of these conflicts. And the fifth biological law is that all diseases, when understood from the perspective of the psyche, from the perspective of evolution, I know that's getting out of fashion at the moment, but I'm afraid there's a lot of evidence, including German medicine, which kind of goes along with it, that from the perspective of evolution and the biological developmental stage that we were at when we developed these body tissues and the symptoms that come along inherently entwined with these body tissues, that it has a beneficial purpose. Every one of these body reactions is trying to help us in a biological way, which is completely incongruous, entirely out of place with a modern day life, which we've only been able to have modern day life for the last, so many 100,000 years. Before that, we were just like the rest of the, creatures crawling around and dodging and diving through life, right? So this is a very recent download that we've got to be able to be really high-minded like we are. But biologically, if you look at it, if you look at all diseases from the perspective and the time epoch where those diseases have come from, they make complete sense, and they were just what was needed. In fact, these diseases are probably the biggest saving grace that's kept our species alive so that we can get to where we are now. They're not diseases. Nothing's a disease. Your body's not trying to kill you, harm you, infect you, spread an infection. None of those things. None at all. The body is just trying to help you biologically. And all we've got to do is wake up, understand it.
Yeah.
And then the fear disappears. Boof. All of the control that comes on the back of that fear, boof, it disappears. All of the lies, all of the we can start to reconsider some things that we might have done in the past with nappies on our face and different things like that. Because do you know what? When you know the truth, you realize that it was silly, to put it mildly. No other species on the planet was as daft as mankind was.
I know, and that level of brainwashing and programming, again, that we've all been through and we've all, suffered.
Completely.
And again, it is suffering. Suffer well, my little children, and like you say, fear, false evidence appearing real, and the fear, and that, that's enough to do it, isn't it? And wow, I suppose it's like without going into the political realm, I see everything out there now as theatre, unless it's like conversations like this, conversations from direct experience, conversations with people like yourself, people like Mr. Blue we do the law with. For me, it's about just exposing and highlighting the lie, really. And yeah, I think, to take like with Trump and everything, these people are not your friends. Trump and Musk now, this victim savior template that we love, they're coming to save everybody now. It's like, wow, it's like, come on, people. I can't take it at the moment anymore. Like, so I just focus on the channel. We expose the true history of the land. We expose the legal fiction. We expose amazing, the pharmaceutical industry, absolutely massive to bring that beast down. And that is one of the arms of that beast. But, Trump is not telling you the truth about cancer. He wants to inject you with an mRNA jibby jab again from the cloud or whatever, and via Musk sticking a neural link chip in your head. These people are not your friends, because I know that, because I've talked to amazing people like you, and I do my research, I do my homework, because that's not how cancer is caused anyway. They're not up there telling people the truth, are they? And somebody who's not telling you the truth is playing both sides. They are not your friends. But that's a rant over. Back over to you. I think we're up to point five. I mean, this stuff is, this
No,
stuff
well,
changes lives, and it saves lives, this stuff. And that's why, I'm super passionate about it for you.
it saves lives. You know what? It does more than save lives, right? Because, oh man, there's just so much to this. It's honestly, we could
It's
be here
so
for
deep.
months. In fact, I'm going to have to go and get a battery soon because my phone's
Oh,
starting to
right, yeah,
blink
no
here.
worries. Don't worry if you
Yeah,
need to hop.
but
I'll just jibber
I'll
jabber
just
and carry on talking to people to get back.
but the for example, right? I'll give you another uh, leaf, another chapter in this massive book, massive piece of knowledge that Dr. Hammer, no, massive piece of self-understanding that Dr. Hammer has given to us. Right? Another piece of knowledge, right? That our, what's the word? Who we are as personalities and where we are, the place in a pack where we are designed to be, right, is predetermined by these brain relays and the traumas that we suffer as kids, right? So, for example, and still to this day, right, 1 in 10 men is an alpha wolf. And if you look at the CT scans of an alpha wolf, you'll see that in the temporal lobes, there's no relays activated, right? 9 out of 10 men are not alpha wolves, and they will have, and we can tell that by looking at a brain scan and say, right, they've got relays active in the right temporal lobe, so they are not alpha wolf, right? You can tell that. But even more and staggeringly fantastical about this is that if you're a right-handed man and you have a conflict in the right temporal lobe, it lowers your testosterone level for the rest of your life. And that's because it doesn't want you to be an alpha wolf, because you've got to be part of the wolf to keep the pack going. Because nature's overarching objective is to keep man alive and keep life alive on this plane for as long as we can. Life is trying to keep life alive, right? And we're just part of life. And man, humanity, just same as your pet dog, is part of life. And everything is designed to keep us individually and us as a pack and us as a species and us as part of life going, right? And therefore, Hammer's work even explains why we are the way we are, right? My dad was a great big strong man, pretty much kept his hair all his life. He was an alpha wolf, sure as hell he was. I know that for a fact. I didn't see the brain scans, but because the cancer industry killed him before I could get this far down the line, right? But nevertheless, I'm a second wolf, because you can't have 2 alpha wolves in a pack, otherwise you just have blood and guts everywhere. It doesn't work, right? Yeah. So everyone else, so I'm a second wolf to my dad, right? If my conflict, which made me into second wolf, was significantly strong, I would have been completely gay, because that's what determines your sexuality, your gender, if you like. You get very feminine men and you get extremely masculine men, and then you get alpha wolves at the top, right? And this is all determined by these things which you can see objectively in the scan, and is 100% correct. How amazing is that? All psychoses, all people that are going around hearing voices or talking to themselves, or paranoid schizophrenics, it's all because the poor people have got these conflicts that need resolved. As soon as you resolve them, they get better right away. They don't take years to get better. They just sort of like wake up and come out of their madness. How amazing is that? And the same happens to women. You'll have 1 in 10 women's an alpha bitch, and then the rest of them are all like they're not. And also, for example, if a right-handed man, if I, as a right-handed man, if I suffer a territorial loss conflict, it will affect my right temporal lobe. If I'm left-handed and I'm a man and I suffer a territorial loss conflict, it gets transposed to the left hemisphere. So guess what it does to the left-handed man? It increases their testosterone level for the rest of their lives. Whereas in a right-handed man, it reduces it. So nature has
interesting.
Right. Nature has built within our species, there's this mechanism so that if times are hard and we need testosterone dominant members of our pack, then the majority will be left-handed, right? And if times are good and we all need to get on together and not fight so much, the majority of people will be right-handed. and it'll seesaw depending on our evolutionary circumstances.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
And 40% of people are left-handed.
Yeah.
And only
Yeah.
about 20% of people know it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And
So
it
it's a
was so
huge
heavily
part.
demonized being left-handed, wasn't it? They used to force children to write with the right hands, didn't they? And perhaps, they don't want dominant alpha
Yeah.
leader wolf style characters in society, do they? Sit down, shut up
Well,
over
perhaps
the.
not. I mean, it goes on and on. But the thing, what one, it's so like your laterality, Dr. Hammer has shown us, is so important. For example, we've talked about glandular breast cancer. So the woman, right? She's got two breasts. She's right-handed. If it was, say, the nest worry was about a child or her mother, so either her mother or her children or her pet pooch, if she loves like a child, then if the trauma involves those people, the so-called cancer will develop exclusively in the left breast,
Right.
and it cannot spread. So bang goes your metastasis theory. Bang, gone.
Right. Well.
But this is for information purposes only, everyone. Okay, but that's it,
Yeah.
gone, shot out of the water, doesn't exist. Right? If the woman's left-handed and the same thing happens, it goes in her right breast exclusively. So your laterality determines where an awful lot of diseases happen in the body.
Yeah.
Now, how amazing is that to discover that? Like, just, it's a whole new world. When you start to realize, you first learn about GNM and you think, nah, I don't believe that. That's a bit weird. That's a bit too fantastic. Then you get into it and you start realizing it's absolutely true to the letter. There's no hypotheses whatsoever. And then you start looking at it, the world, through this lens, and it's a totally different world you see. Right?
Yeah.
Totally different. You see the scale, as Hammer says, the scales fall from your eyes, and you can start to see life in its full beauty. And
Wow.
I'll leave it on that note. I'm just going to go and get a charger
No
and
worries.
plug my phone in before I
Yes, I'll,
disappear.
I'll,
Okay.
I'll have a little jibber jabber to people because I want to get into etymology as well because that's what I do. But exactly. So while Robert goes gets his charger, we know that traditional medicine allegedly comes from Medici or the Medici family, and we know that there's all these bloodlines behind the dark occult meaning, and we know that they're treating symptoms and not causes. And it's interesting to kind of have a look at some of the etymology as well. As we said earlier, prescription literally means to write a spell. It's a coded enchantment upon the person. Pharmacy, as we know from the Greek, a big one, pharmakia, meaning sorcery and witchcraft. Now, this is an interesting one. Patient, meaning one who suffers. So again, the system is labeling you as a passive sufferer. Comes from the Latin patiens, and hospital comes from the Latin hospice, meaning stranger or guest. It wants you as a guest, like you would be a guest in a hotel, in your hotel bed. Again, more dependency. We won't say the V word, but the V word, the jibby jabby, comes from vaka, meaning cow, which traces back to ancient cultic rituals of sacrificing livestock to the gods for immunity. I mean, it gets weirder. Diagnosis from the Greek to discern or decide. And all these pre-approved definitions, just as Robert has said, you're going to go to the doc tour, the doc again, we've got the shipping terms, the tour of, an energy center. They're going to absolutely bombard you with all this terminology. We know that words are spells, and they're going to sell you completely down the river. And that is exactly what's happened to us as well. I can go on. Cancer is Latin for crab, which means to grip. But as we're starting to learn, and as Robert's teaching us, this is part of a biological repair process. So again, the occult symbolism and the occult meanings run through this industry as it runs through everything. And we are the coders and the decoders. I mean, the caduceus, which is the staff of Hermes, as we'll all see, the two snakes around the staff, it represents commerce. And that's what it's about. It's about trade. It's about deception. Again, keeping us in commerce, just as the legal fiction, the person, the persona, the resident, the occupier keeps us in commerce. The Red Cross, everybody remembers the Red Cross. It just goes so good. It absolutely, literally represents the Rosicrucian symbol of sacrifice and blood, and obviously is linked to the Rothschilds or the Red Shields. And we know about the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and allopathic medicine and destroying the old knowledge, which obviously Robert is beautifully helping bring back as we do here on Dark Matters. And of course, then we've got the black cube, which is found in pharmaceutical symbology, etc. And we know about Saturn, the mast, the frequency. So anyway, back to you, Robert, as I've beautifully, I'd say, everybody filled that gap there. Thank you very much. Good night. God bless. I mean, I used to date a guy who, as we all did, was doing something completely different before the pandemic. Yeah, and I went back to my law books. He was a master builder who went into blood analysis, and I saw the blood of the GB jabbed in real time and the effect of these jabs on the blood, and it absolutely links in with the GNM, because the blood, as I learned, is actually holographic in nature as well, or certainly that's a huge area of study. You decide. I'm not telling you it is or it's not. Go look at it for yourself, as we say. But it was so interesting about it was linked to trauma. Again, you could get these trauma crystals in the blood. And people perhaps say, like, one example was where someone had a knee injury, and that an image of the knee, the trauma on the knee from when they'd fallen off and been in this car accident, the actual image of the knee was in the blood itself. And the blood was actually this holographic imprint and showing you the trauma in the body. So it's like as a code then to obviously, to showing you what perhaps needs to be healed or is healing. I mean, we've literally, we can't express enough on here how deep the rabbit hole and the lie goes in this, can we? And to bring this to light it's the end. It's a game changer, just like the legal fiction. It's like, I'm so passionate. If people could just get this, if people could just get banking and the deceit of that, the whole, that beast of Rome, as we've been battling it for centuries, is going down. And it is a spiritual war, isn't it, Robert? Like 100%.
Yeah, I think it is. I realize that now. Yeah, I only became aware of the war, you might call it, in 2020. And I obviously I've been in studying German new medicine for a long time. I knew a lot about it. And of course, when the so-called the virus escaped from Wuhan and all this, right? I knew that was just not true, because
The
virus,
the big
something that doesn't exist can't escape, right? I mean, that's just the way it is, right? So I was sort of chirping off about that, but I didn't know anything about the rest. I just thought, well, that's all we need to know. But in this, 5 years now, I've now delved right into the legal and lawful jurisdictions, and you just realize that this is a theater we're in. Honestly, you things that you take is, I say, well, this is me, my name or whatever, but it's not. Your name's written in various different ways. It's got various different, what do they call them? Trusts attached to them that are making money for somebody else, and you don't even know about it. And it's just so, like you said, the layers of deceit are extremely impressive. Let's put it that way. They've done a marvelous job. They've had a long time doing it, and they've been very quiet in the background doing this. But my good Lord, they've made such a fantastic good job of it, because 7.5 billion people are clueless to it. You know what I mean? And yet we are it. We are the lie. Lies don't exist without people to believe them, right? So we are the lie. We are the living lie, right? And like you were, Callie, before you met me, with respect to health, you were the living lie of health.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I knew more than your average Joe, but now it's just like it's next level stuff, isn't it? We're all peeling back
yeah,
our onions, like.
yeah. It's a case of just going through these like holographic walls, and you realize there's no wall there. When you go through, you enter a new reality. And my advice is, if you can touch it, right? If you can understand it, if you can prove to yourself that it's true, then it probably is true. But if you have to believe somebody else telling you it's true, it's probably not going to be true. That's my word, my advice. That would go, that certainly with health. You know, if a doctor says your virus, well, prove it. Can you prove to me that virus? Oh, well, such and such study. Well, let me see the study. Where in there is the proof? I want to touch base. I actually want to touch the proof of that. I want to see it done, right? The proof. I don't want to read, you know, you get a study, a medical study about something, and then you read the last bit, which is just the synopsis of it, and they say, oh, well, we think the da-da-da. Don't want to look at that. I want to look at the actual evidence and say, right, how have you done this? So you get right down to the basics. How have you actually come up with that conclusion? Oh, and then it falls apart, and the lie becomes exposed, and you're then free of that lie. Then it's no longer, well, no, I shouldn't say it no longer has power over you, because it does, but the power changes. When you realize that all the truth about diseases, which I'm asking people to look at, to research themselves, and then once they've gone to the website, look at their own lives and notice how the truth is ever present, even though it's not hard, it's not easy to see, it's ever present. And it only becomes present when you start to look at your life and your health through the prism of this knowledge, right? Then it becomes, you prove it yourself quickly then. But you know, so getting you know, getting ourselves into a place where we cannot be controlled by a lie, because at the end of the day, it's about control. Money's about control. I've got no money. I can't even control the situation to feed myself, or I've got trillions of dollars and I'm psychopathic. I did a brain scan of certain rich people, I bet you they'll be full of flipping psychoses in there. You'd be able to go, oh my God, look. So that poor trillionaire can't help himself by being a greedy, driven, you know, psychopath, right? Because this Hammer's work is true for everyone. But at least find something that's true, and then believe that and work from there. That's where luckily I was introduced to German New Medicine after a conversation I had in Auckland with a guy in 2006. And here I am. That was just my thread. That was truth. And from one truth, you can start to then, from the point of truth, you can spot a lie.
Exactly.
And right, you then got to look at yourself and say, okay, so how is that a lie? Now I can see the truth. Before I could see the truth, how was that lie controlling me? You know, and then you start to sort of, you know, then the bigger sort of things in life start to play on your mind. You know, like for example, and what was I going to say was, like German New Medicine's great. It removes the fear of disease, right? But you know what happened to me in 2020, right? I suddenly gained a fear of society, because I thought, oh my God, they know full well this is a lie and this is happening. Oh, I was went into complete panic for years, right? Because of what's been done by people who know they're doing it. Because the people that really took Dr. Hammer's work seriously was these people. They took his research and it scurried away with it. And they've been, I believe, for entertainment purposes only, I believe that they're using his knowledge in a negative way. They're creating the fears which create the chest problems, right? Because Dr. Hammer tells us the bronchial network, the bronchi of the lungs, is the conflict is fear in your territory. Now, come on, we're all feared of the virus, aren't we? Everyone was feared of everyone. Everyone had to have a face mask on. If you believed this, you're frightened of the people that you're sitting next to on the bus, right? Now, when that starts to go into healing, you get the symptoms, which got then diagnosed as, guess what?
Yeah. But the word we're not.
Yes. So this goes deeper, much wider and further than just health. It's actually the controlling of the farm. We're being farmed, and this is how you control the sheep.
The farmer.
Right?
Wow. Yeah, didn't connect that one. Farmer, farm. Wow, yeah, and it is the
Okay.
fear. It is absolutely the fear, and I was having this conversation on Facebook, and I don't get into this stuff. You know, it's that old adage. You know, if you argue with a fool, you're a fool. You know, only fools argue with fools. But you know, no disrespect, but I just don't bother anymore. I know that sounds awful,
Right, me
and
too.
and I have been accused. It was I think it was on the law video, the big one I did with Mr. Blue the other day. Said, "Why is she laughing? This isn't funny." It's just like so. If people who do follow me will know, I'm from Bolton, so we have to kind of find everything funny, you know, because we're northern. Else, because if you don't laugh, you'd cry. And it's theatre, it's the Divine Comedy. Now, I always do like I just like to clarify. I do sometimes come across a little bit flippant, and I've acknowledged that, but I'm not flippant. You know, I wouldn't be doing what I do if I didn't care. But you know, there's also a level of detachment that has to come in the end because you can see and observe it for what it actually is. And like you said, we are the ones creating it. Now, I've tried to get this through to the Truth Movement, but you know, they come up with the narrative. We make it real for them, you know. So and it's disconnecting that and also connecting that dot that kind of, you know, will free your mind. Like you say, you know, the fear of it, like you said, oh, you know, this is doing this is doing that. They put it all over the news and we go, oh, all the truth people going, they're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing that. And we're creating it with our consciousness, with our minds. You know, this is the usury system. This is the usurper. And the strongest word that we can have, and we know words are spells, is no. You know, it's like Neo, you know, and it's like, you know, he just turns around in the end to Agent Smith and goes, no, and remembers who he is, like, and it's and I can I've brought it down to that meme from being awake for 20 odd years. I can't kind of get it any and why the journey for me on this channel, if you see it from the beginning to the end. And I'm about to do another Carly Decord's Clown World because there's one long overdue, but it's only because I've been in a rabbit in my own headlights for the last however many months as I meet all these amazing characters who contact. I mean, that's why I keep doing the podcast. I'm not a natural, I wouldn't say I find it a natural, enjoyable process because I'm quite introverted in lots of ways. But the people that I meet and the opportunities that I get, you know, for my own learning, and all I've ever said is that I then share that out. And if you find it interesting, amazing, support the channel, maybe even join the channel. That helps me even more. But if not, just turn me off. It's fine. I'm not offended type of thing. But just before we kind of tie it up, because I mean, by this point I hope people have got to the end, because you know people's attention spans can be quite small in this day and age, and I am going to get better on TikTok, but I kind of slightly refuse. But but I did promise people I'd kind of go into the leukemia thing for the perhaps the memory and honor of my sister, because obviously when we had that conversation on the phone and you were telling me that obviously it's a conflict shocked in and of itself, again I think that's what you said. So, and obviously leukemia is linked to the bone marrow of the bones and blood cell production and self-devaluation, I think it was that you'd said as well. I mean, I was listening to you talk and I do exactly what I do all the time, but I'm a lot better. Compartmentalize that conversation and got on with my day, you know. But you know, that was years of trauma I've had to unpick, you know, like you said about the brain. I was 10 or 11, I couldn't deal with that, so my brain in protection has gone, that goes over there, and I had to survive. I had to learn to kind of just get on with things, like and people who follow the channel know the story of perhaps my sister and my family and everything. So that splintered our family. That was it, job done. So I kind of grew up in a very kind of you know, I grew up very quickly, really, which woke me up very quickly as well. So I do believe all these things kind of happen for a reason. But I suppose, like I was saying at the beginning of the podcast, and people might have gone, well, finish the story, Carly. So I will a little bit, but I don't want to take up too much time banging on, so I'll keep it brief. But like I say, that night, I woke up and I was shivering, and I honestly, genuinely think that was one of the last releases of all that trauma, because I've done a lot of work unpicking all that over the years, and you know, I've suppressed that trauma with perhaps some bad behaviors I've picked, and again, I won't go too much into that. And I've never been a victim to it, but I also do think that night, you know, like your sister, like that break, like I was having a breakdown, and I absolutely, you know, not blaming you here, Robert. There's no blame, but I linked that to our conversation that day. I think it was like a last piece in a puzzle for me. And I think I had to release that stored, stagnant. I think it was literally coming out of my body in a myriad of different ways. And I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that.
Well, that happens a lot with people who I have conversations with, right? I see clients. I'm a therapist. See clients from all over the world, um, and that happens a lot because healing, you, the body's been it's like a coiled spring, trying to help you biologically with something, and when you get release on that, or even when you just get closure on it, it can be sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of the times, people can just go into healing when they just realize what the heck's been going on. And I've seen that with somebody who had Crohn's disease, uh, I don't know, 12 years. I can't remember exactly, for a long, long time, right? This woman had Crohn's disease. She was a yoga teacher, but her classes very often got cut short on that because depending on what her body was doing, right? And she just completely went through the healing. She went through about 4 days of hell, and then she was fine after that. And she's now completely free of any Crohn's disease, just by joining the dots and going back to the actual thing that she really messed up, and she really, like, the trauma that it sort of involved her. It's like a conflictive trauma. It's just an external trauma. It's a trauma where she kind of felt kind of part of the problem of the trauma. It's like these traumas are not so easy to find and unpick apart, because they're not just straight, oh my God, that was frightening, like you do when you go to the Disneyland or something and you go on a slide that you wish you never got on, right? And you think, oh, that's a trauma. But the traumas I'm talking about are the ones that, like, you're kind of maybe partly implicated in it in some way. At least your brain thinks so. That's why it's kind of jumped in biologically. Well, anyway, with this, for example, this is a good example. This woman went through about 4 days of, it was coming out of her both ends, right? She'd been through a lot of years of Crohn's disease. She was vomiting. She was going to the toilet, a lot. She was in pain, stomach cramps, da 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 da, right? But then after that was over, that's it, done and dusted. The body's back, gets back to normal. It's a done thing. Full stop, finished, move on. She's now fine. Eats what she wants, lives the life of the dream. So it's even, and I didn't, the healing was just the final emotional realization of like, she went sort of almost back to the time of trauma, and then went through the emotional wave and allowed it to come out. And that's the same with my sister too, by the way. Okay. That's two very serious conditions, very chronic conditions, life-changing conditions, just went into healing through that process of talking, of community, of touching, of sharing the burden, of just like being an emotional poultice and just getting that splinter out. Do you know what I mean? So that's what I offer. That's my thing, right? And also telling people about it, because learning this, it should be taught. Like my son, who's homeschooled, he's 5. He already knows about German new medicine.
Wow.
Right? And he will never be controlled through fear of a disease.
Yeah. And that's that nail on the head right there. That one sentence, control through fear of disease, is exactly the game in it. Like, everything's attacking us, something from outside. It's like, before, it's like the war on terror in it before COVID. It's like, wow, did all the terrorists get COVID and die? Because that seemed to disappear all of a sudden, didn't it? Like, it's the new war. It's like they're keeping us in a constant state of,
that's as you know, Callie, that's a legal, like I said, America's been at war ever since 17, whenever it was, right? And the actual American flag is the war flag. Do you know? Every American thinks that's the American. It's not the American flag whatsoever. The American flag, the stripes are vertical. Do you know what I mean? But we are kept in war, because then it puts in place a whole pile of legal governance that allows people to do what they want to do to make themselves richer. Do you know what I mean?
I'm just sitting that woman ticking me off in my head, like as you're saying something really serious, and I'm going, ha 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 ha. I'm just like laughing again. What it's like when I go to the dentist, I'll nervous laugh because it is bad. It is bad, but the beauty of it is that we're seeing it because they have to keep us in perpetual war for them to be able to tax us. And the beat goes on, you know, as we kind of
But
uncover
it's ignorance. You see, they have to keep us in ignorance. The
yeah,
spell is broken as soon as you see it's a spell. As soon as you see for
exactly.
what it is, you see the
Yeah,
truth. The truth, the truth cannot. The lie can be real until the truth exists, right? And then when
yeah,
the truth exists, right, boom, the lie just vanishes, and we have to rebalance ourselves within this new paradigm that we've suddenly evolved into. Right, bang! I have to all these things like, oh, I've caught a cold, or don't sneeze on me, or cut you in the daddy daddy da, right? All of that just goes ping. Oh, and that leaves you in a vacuum of, oh my God, well, what's true? Or people get confused. So what happens? I'll tell you what happens mostly, Callie. People go into cognitive dissonance and just listen to you and agree with you and understand you, but then cruise on regardless. And,
yeah,
and so cognitive dissonance is a very real thing, and it's unfortunate, but my hope is, because I've done quite a few talks with people, and I'm hoping that with a bit of repetition, it'll sort of go in. They say something becomes true if you hear it 6 times. This is the
yeah,
sort of advertising way, doesn't matter what it is, even if it's subliminally put into your brain, if you hear it 6 times and it's not questioned in any of those times, it becomes the truth. And I'm hoping that my little message, me sort of chipping away in the background of various shows and different things, I'll be like, oh, that's that Jardine fella again. He's saying the same thing. Maybe there is some truth in that. Maybe I'll tell my sister who's going for a third dose of chemo. Maybe I'll just say, look, have a look at that website and see what you think. And maybe
yeah,
give him a call or whatever. Get in touch, get some help that's coming from a different
yeah,
place than
yeah.
the health that we get for nothing.
Absolutely. And I think that's a perfect note to kind of finish on. And, it's such a deep topic. Please, I will put the links below and Robert's links below. He's in real time, helped a very good friend of mine. So I've seen this work in real time. If you want a consultation with him, or you simply want to just learn a bit more, that we'll put up the German New Medicine website so you can, as we always say on Dark Matters, don't believe me, don't believe Robert. Go and see this for yourself. Make up your own mind. That's what keeps us sharp and keeps us sovereign, etc. and so on. But yeah, I could, you could deep dive it for like we said, days and days and days. It's such a huge topic. But if you can get the basics down, and everybody knows somebody who's affected by this, like 100%. So please do
Totally.
share this episode because, like we said, if we can expose the banking system, the legal system, the pharmaceutical, all these arms of war, and it is a war, and as we said, it is a spiritual war without going too woo woo, then we are certainly on the right track. So thank you so much, Robert, for taking the time out to come and share that with us. It's absolutely game changing, and hopefully we'll have you back on again if you're up for it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a complete pleasure. It's lovely to speak to you, Callie, and just go with knowledge and be frightened of nothing.
Exactly. Peace. And thanks everyone for watching, and we will catch you next time.
Bye bye.
Bye.